Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. On behalf of OTC Markets, we are very pleased you have joined us for our OTCQB Venture Conference. Our next live presentation is from Telo Genomics. Please note you may submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for a one-on-one meeting by clicking a book a meeting in the top toolbar. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Guido Bachler, Executive Chairman of Telo Genomics, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol TDSGF and on the TSXV under the symbol TELO. Welcome, Guido.
Thank you, Greg, for the introduction, and welcome all. I'm pleased to introduce Telo Genomics to all of you, a leading healthcare company focusing on providing novel molecular and AI support solutions for cancer and neurodegenerative disease. I'm Guido Bachler, the Executive Chairman. I've spent the last 30 years, a little bit over 30 years in the healthcare space with very large companies like Roche and also very many small companies, always developing innovative solutions to provide better care for patients and also better information tools for physicians to make better decisions. And this is really driven because I've seen firsthand in many ways that patients face challenges with accessing timely and affordable care, and physicians struggling sometimes to not having the right clinical information to, for example, further prescribe cancer medications or help therapy. I met Telo Genomics several years ago, and I was always incredibly impressed with the technology, which I'll give you an overview today. It is a hidden and totally undervalued jewel, I believe. The company changed leadership earlier this year, and I'm very excited to share with you some of the new strategies that we put in place since then. As Greg said, please feel free to add any questions. I would like to give all the. So with this, let's move in. Again, as I mentioned initially, this is a very unique company that offers very unique solutions in very, very large markets. I think that's very important. We're not a little niche, operating in a niche market. This is really massive. The first one I want to highlight is minimal residual market, and many of you are probably very familiar with new clinical point diagnosed by the FDA a year ago. I'm going to take my earpod. I hope you can hear me better now. We have focused on MRD, and here MRD, as you know, is a clinical endpoint. It's important as you've been diagnosed with cancer and you start receiving therapy. There's a time point which is called minimal residual disease, where a physician basically looks at you and says, well, you have now reached a certain level, low level of cancer cells. You kind of cured, but the therapy may not be helpful going forward, and so the physician has to make a decision what to do, and that's what's happening today. So there's an uncertainty, and in that very important point whether the physician should further treat you or not, because all the tools available today are only providing the number of cells, number of cancer cells, for example. Telo Genomics with its tool is able not only to give you an accurate number, more sensitive than anybody else, but also profiles those cells. Are those cells actually aggressive cancer cells, or are they not? And that really is an important pivotal point for the physician to make a strategy what to do with the patient. And that's a massively growing market. I think it's really important. We really, I believe, we're going to be a key player in that area with our tool. Second one is Alzheimer's. I don't need to tell you how big that market is. But it's also changing because in the past, there was not really much one could do about it once you have Alzheimer's, and now there are no therapies coming out. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So having now tools available, not just the cognitive tests that you have to go through and answer all these questions, but really very innovative, non-invasive tests that can really quickly identify whether you have mild Alzheimer's, very critical, because you can really then minimize the impact Alzheimer's has in dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases. Also massively growing. And third point I want to talk about today is the prostate cancer. Here as well, massive market, again, especially for us guys. You do not want to have this biopsy if you don't have to have it because of the side effects. I'll talk about that as well, because we have already shown some clinical data that we can do a non-invasive test and very powerful data to identify whether you have aggressive or very aggressive or non-aggressive cancer, so you can slow down or do not do the biopsy. So very exciting news to come in the next 20 minutes. But before I go into all this, what's the technology that Telo Genomics is actually using? And it's really important I think it's important to understand that we're operating in an area that's well understood, but not very applied yet to clinical diagnostics. And it's the telomere analysis. So basically, we're looking at telomeres of individual cells and make conclusions out of this. But this all starts with genomic instability. So when a cell is stable, it is not a challenge for people. But how can you identify this? So the genomic stability is important. But if a cell starts being unstable, that's really important. That starts with the chromosomes and the telomeres. There's changes in this dynamic that one needs to understand. And if the cell starts to be unstable, you can start looking at what actually happened there. And it starts with the telomeres. The telomeres can actually send, telomeres are the end pieces of the chromosomes who really help stabilizing the chromosomes. If those telomeres are starting to be different, the length is changing, the number is changing, where they structured, where they're in the spatial structure. These are all very important elements to understand on a cell base what's actually happened to the patient. And the telomere changes are critical. Many of you have heard about longevity and telomere length, right? Which is very popular. People use it. There's $1 billion of markets starting to grow up, which we can do participate as well. But we're looking more than just a length. We're looking at other areas, and how many telomeres you have is really important. Where they're structured within the spatial structure is also important. So we have 6 parameters that we're specifically looking at it that will ultimately put together in our tool to make the right diagnosis. So again, look at us as a really future company that will completely change how people look about telomeres, not just length. There's way more clinical information in it that we'll start to show you a little bit more in today's presentation. So once you leave this presentation, I hope you have 4 main points that you really take back from us. First of all, Telo Genomics is changing. Again, we have a new management team, we have a new structure, we have new strategies put in place. We're addressing critical needs in very large markets. Second point is we're absolutely the leading provider in telomere-based prognostic molecular solutions. There's nobody else who has the tools that we have to look at all the different type of telomere biomarkers at the cell level. It's really important when you hear about other people measuring length of telomeres, they look at an average of many, many cells using PCR, for example. We're looking at individual cells, which is the best possible biology view you can have. So wonderful applications here as we'll go through today. The new leadership that we put in place, extremely experienced, accelerate solutions that we can offer through our CAP CLIA certified laboratory that we have in Toronto. We're very experienced building partnerships with clinical institutions, and you saw very recently that the big announcement with Cleveland Clinic, very, very strong pull to work with us in the MRD field. But we also have good discussions and connections with companies about licensing opportunities. And that's an important part of our business. Is you have a platform technology, you don't want to do everything yourself. You explore abilities to actually license certain disease areas out of it where you may not want to focus on. And that's a big activity that we're started off as well. And continue to build an IP portfolio, which is very important. And also, we're starting to think about how to ultimately uplift our company into the US market on NASDAQ. So that's a strategy that we're starting to push forward. And last but not least, look at the names that we're able to work with, the clinical collaborators we have in the United States that are absolutely leading. And we're very excited to be able to drive more of those collaborations forward as we progress the company forward. So who's going to do all that work? So here's just the snapshot. Again, we are a relatively small team, but very efficiently built up. Sabine is the founder. She is really one of the, I would say, world's leading expert in super microscope resolution. So she sees everything way before anybody else. It's phenomenal what she's done. Then we have Chris, a very successful CFO, and Mark Steen run very, very large clinical laboratories in the US, Quest, etc. So very strong. We have phenomenal advisors, clinical advisors, and we just recently also added John Farlinger, a very experienced CEO as well in the space, helping us think through strategically how to move on. And then we have a great medical director, Dr. Hans Knecht, that is based in Toronto as well. So again, a great group, and then we have the team underneath, of course, who does a lot of lab work in our offices in Toronto. So TeloView, I'll give you some information here. There's more on our website, but fundamentally, we're looking at 6 different telomere parameters, and we have them highlighted here. On our website, you can also see a video. So what you see here is a distribution of telomeres actually in a healthy cells and the diseased cell. What's interesting is that the healthy cell has a nice distribution. These telomeres are all about the same length. They look very similar. The moment you look at a diseased cell, you start seeing clumping together. They're much shorter. There are fewer of them. It changes massively. And that's really the core of our technology, to see those changes and then ultimately make clinical decisions for individual patients. And the process is actually very simple, right? So we are familiar with some of the PCR reaction. You're familiar with next-gen sequencing. This is a simple FISH analysis. Basically, we can use any type of sample media, which is fascinating because we can use a biopsy, cancer tumor cells, we can use blood, we can use buccal swabs, and you will see more data on buccal swabs in Alzheimer's. We can identify Alzheimer's using a simple buccal swab. Think about how easy that is. Then we have tumor tissues and bone marrows. We can really use all of them. And what we then do is we put this on a slide, and then we correlate the FISH technology, and then we look at the microscope, and we look at about 80 different positions, C positions, and then we create, our software creates in a 3D structure of those telomeres, and that's the picture. So before, here's another picture, and that then goes into our software, our machine learning-based software, and basically pulls out the correct information and makes the clinical conclusion. So very simple. It's really important. This can be very, very easily implemented into partner laboratories, which is important for strategic partners, but also applied to other areas if needed. So if you go into our portfolio, this is, again, it's important for you to see where we're actually going. And I got questions before as well. Where are you guys going? What is the next product you're going to develop? And clearly, our focus is multiple myeloma right now. We have great traction going on in smoldering. We'll talk about more in a minute about minimal residual disease, because I think that is the hottest area right now. We have probably the most differentiating data to come out. And first-line therapy management is important too, because we can help physicians identify what therapy to use to actually keep the relapse delaying as much as possible. So very exciting work we're doing here with the Mayo Clinic. Alzheimer's is new to us. This is the first time we are talking about Alzheimer's. We got some phenomenal data from Sherbrooke University, where we've been able to show together with Sabine May and Dr. Black that our technology can very, very effectively actually identify mild Alzheimer's with a simple buccal swab. Very exciting. And then last but not least is prostate cancer. Here we already have shown data. We'll give you some more data today. And the plan is here to do further clinical studies with experts to validate our test and ultimately also offer it through our ClearCap certified lab. So let's talk about multiple myeloma for a minute. I don't want to go too far into the details here, but it's a clear progression of how multiple myeloma actually occurs. Again, I want to start with MGUS, which is kind of the beginning where you start seeing some of the biomarkers are really starting to be off. Some of the proteins are very high, and physicians starting to wonder about what to do with that patient. Well, we have a solution here. Basically, we have now developed a test that can guide the physician whether they want to start doing, whether the patient is actually at risk of actually progressing to the disease or not progressing to disease. So start treatment, right? And more therapies are coming out. Some recent data come out as well that it's very advantageous for certain patients to treat, because first-time patients shown that actually never progress to myeloma, which is what we ultimately like to do, right? We want to make sure we are able to provide the tool to the physician, say, if it has, start that patient therapy quickly and aggressive, because then it may never progress to multiple myeloma. which is the holy grail. Second one is the newly diagnosed. I spoke about that briefly before. And third is MRD. MRD is really the key message for us moving forward. And I have a slide specifically on that. And I want to guide you through that for a moment. So you see on the left side, the chart that shows you, you have a very high disease burden when you've been identified as multiple myeloma patients. When with the therapy, the level is going down, right? That the measurable burden is going down, which is important what you want to see. And then it goes below a certain cutoff, and that's called the minimal residual disease, which is a number of cells, for example, per microliter. And then it stays undetectable, and then one time it comes back up again. So here's where we come in. Basically, we are developing a test that's more sensitive than anybody else, which means we go further lower, right? We can basically be more accurate in that area. But most importantly, we're not just counting cells, but we're identifying and profiling those cells, whether they're aggressive or not. And that is really, really important because that allows the physician to have a dialogue and figure, well, it may be below the detectable level, but the cells that they're still finding are actually aggressive. Do not stop therapy. So the goal, what we're doing is really extend the relapse as much as possible with our tools. And the third point is important is this is a liquid biopsy test. This is a blood test that can be drawn at any time. And that's important because today everybody's using bone marrow. And bone marrow is not, for those who've ever had one, it's not an easy accessible sample. So it's much, much easier to do actually a regular monitoring at MRD, which is something important to us as well. So on the right side here, we see some timelines, work with Cleveland Clinic. I think the important part here I want to highlight is that we plan to have a CLIA/CAP certified lab test available by the end of this year. We have publications coming up. We have a phenomenal relationship with Cleveland. So we're very excited to start giving more information on that and the progress of that. And then furthermore, we will also, add additional AI tools into these tools to even further emphasize and make the test even better. So very exciting, more news to come here on the multiple myeloma side. So let me briefly talk about Alzheimer's. I think here you're all familiar. It's growing massively. It's very scary because it comes out of the blue sometimes. People start forgetting things. It is certainly impacting, and I got a really good friend who was just diagnosed with it, which is very scary. Guy's only 6 years old, no family history. So how can we do it, and what can we do afterwards? And I think what majorly changed between now and 5-6 years ago is now the therapies are approved. The amyloid tests that are now available in the therapies are really starting to help people not progress as fast. So early detection is even more important. Exciting stuff here. Again, what we're doing is here as well, offering an inexpensive solution that fits into the workflow. When you see what actually happens today, if somebody has cognitive issues, first of all, nobody wants to talk about it, and then they finally go to a physician who then does the cognitive test. If that is show abnormality, then the patient goes and does it depend where you live. In US more than in Europe or Canada, for example, you start doing the PET scanning, right? So you do the amyloid PET or the tau PET for identifying whether you have amyloids in your brain. If you do, then you do some additional tests before you then get the therapy. The way we envision our test is very early on. It can be like you do a lipid test at a certain age, of age 50. You should all start getting one of those tests. Just do it. It's inexpensive, and you can clearly show as you if your profile is fine, you do not progress towards Alzheimer's at this stage. Do this on a regular basis, and you can be active. Longevity will start playing a role here. Wellness, health, all that is starting to play a role, and I believe you're going to be a main driver in this whole paradigm change of how to actually prevent not just Alzheimer's but potentially other neurodegenerative diseases. Telomeres are being used, I mentioned that before, across areas, but only length. We're not the first one talking about it, but we're the first one talking about multiple parameters. Here on the slide 15, you see a few publications. Again, ours, we've done the first work in 2014, 2017, and then very recently in 2025. And that's really the indication of us getting involved in Alzheimer's again, because now there are solutions. 2014, 2017, it's great to show the data, but there was no therapy. Now there's therapy, and this makes a major change for us. On the right side, again, some key timelines that actually show where we're going. And here, I think the key milestone for you to know is we will publish information in the coming months. and we'll plan to have also the test if cleared through our CAP clear lab by beginning of next year. So very exciting steps here. The third is prostate cancer here as well. I mentioned it, how big that is, how fast it's growing. The important here is, distinguishing between clinical significant, aggressive, and indolent, the slow-growing, non-harmful disease. This is the most important thing that are people struggling today, and they do a lot of biopsies that they need to do. And biopsies, as I hope none of you guys have gone through this, but it causes a lot of issues, right? So, so we have shown already, and really what's needed is having a Gleason 7 that's really in the level where they don't know if it's below or above 6 or 5 or 8 is clear, you need to do it. But there's a big level where nobody knows exactly what to do. And we have data already done in the past that actually shows that we can do that, and more work will be done going forward. So this is another milestone that we will push forward as we progress the company. So with this, I want to move on to some financials, and that deck will also be uploaded on our website. You can see this. We also we're regularly reporting our financials. You'll see where we are. Again, we're not happy with the share price. We're certainly working on pushing this in the other direction. But what I do want to highlight here is this company has a lot of patents in place. We're working constantly on expanding more patents, not just in Canada, US, and also international. We also received in the past funding that came in through Sabine May's lab that really helped us push the technology forward. And we have over 3,000 patients already been tested with the technology. So it's really well established. We really need to just do the breakthrough to make this company more aware, the public more aware of the power of what we have as a company. And so I think that's how we're going to do this. I think one area is, achieving, clearly milestones that drive shareholder value. And here we'll talk about a few points. We already announced the change of our strategy. We're moving into Cleveland for the MRD. We will initiate multi-center prostate studies in Q3. We'll also plan some submission of technical papers and an ASH abstract. Really important because this is the first foray of Telo Genomics talking about its ability for minimal residual disease. Q4 we'll have the first MRD validated in our lab, and we will also start doing clinical trials in the Alzheimer's space. And we're initially going to expand this, even not just looking at Alzheimer's, but also looking at diseases and health wellness, right? So we can relatively easy do some studies that show that if you change your behavior, we can actually show changes in the telomeres. Exciting stuff to do. Moving then into Q1 with the AD test, and also again looking at continued partnerships. This is an ongoing milestone for us to talk about partnerships with strategic partners for MRD as well as an Alzheimer's test. And then again, we will do some interim analysis of the MRD second generation, which includes profiling. So it's very exciting activities that we will do in the coming month and quarters. And last but not least, I'd like to close this presentation out with a summary yet again of our highlights. Clearly, we have a new leadership team that has made massive changes already, and very exciting to see how quick we're actually moving through some of the discussions, activities. We are clearly a leading provider in telomeric solutions. We have solutions that are operating in very, very large markets. That's very important. And we continue to work and improve on shareholder value-driven milestones. We understand how important that is for all of us. And also the technology has been evaluated in many institutions, and ultimately, as mentioned before, we are planning to uplift the company as well into EU NASDAQ stock option. So that's the plan. And with that, I can open up for questions, if any questions. All right, there are a bunch of questions here, and I'm going through them. One question was for Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative applications. Are there plans for direct-to-consumer engagements, or will you go to market remain strictly clinical? That is a really good question, and quite frankly, we are evaluating this. This will then also be required in discussion with FDA, because we cannot just go out and sell an Alzheimer test. So this is discussion. We're discussing as well getting some of those tests FDA approved, specifically on the Alzheimer's front. I think the idea would be that our vision is that anybody can order the test and do it at home. We just have to make sure it's actually approved accordingly to the regulatory regulations. But that's a great question. Let's see. Let's go over here. Yeah, what is your pathway and projected timeline towards a potential FDA approval and/or reimbursement of your test in the US? That's a great question. Again, we are discussing this right now with reimbursement experts as well. We believe MRD and Alzheimer's might be the first two ones you want to push forward. The first step would be to do a pre-sub with the agency to really understand what they want us to do. Again, the test will be available, CLIA/CAP certified. And we have to discuss whether we need to go to the FDA with them to get reimbursed or not. So again, some of the tests can be absolutely reimbursed if they don't even have not FDA approval, since it's not a screening test. But it all depends on the clinical claim you actually want. That's a great question. Next question was, how does Telo Genomics fundamentally improve upon traditional average telomere length measurements in providing actual clinical insights? That's a wonderful question. Thank you so much for asking that. So again, I grew up with PCR. I spent many years with Roche kind of developing PCR, and I understand the value of PCR. And when you measure and most data points you get today, when companies report telomere length, it's using PCR. And so they're just using an average number for multiple cells they're measuring. And that's okay for certain things. But as you look at publications, they're often conflicting. And I wonder, I don't have the answer for that, but I wonder it has to do because you don't look detail enough. You don't go deep enough into the individual cells. That's what we do. We're looking at actual individual cells. So we're looking at 30 to 50 individual cells, and out of that, then we create the information. And the second part is important is, length is not everything. We have algorithms developed that don't even use length. They use other of the 6 biomarkers. So it's really important to understand that not every disease can be identified with length, and that's what we're starting to show. Great question. Can you provide some more details around your Alzheimer's identification work, timeline, best estimate on commercial availability? Again, that is also a question that, again, we're starting this program now. The team is in the middle of developing and validating in our CLIA lab. We'll have to do more studies. Again, the initial data that we're doing with Sunnybrook is phenomenal. That should be closed out soon, and then will be published. And we'll do additional studies. So the goal is to get this actually certified in our lab by beginning of next year. And then we'll actively work on how we get this into the commercial labs. We do have a US partner already. He's highly interested in taking this on and actually offering it through their laboratory. So this would be a licensing opportunity. They would, for example, looking at for wellness. There's an interesting aspect there. So, but the goal, I would say, stay tuned on this, but the goal is to get it certified in a CLIA lab at the beginning of next year. Next question, with significant projected growth in MRD, Alzheimer's, prostate cancer, how does Telo plan to prioritize and sequence market entry across these indications? So great point as well. Again, clearly here, right now we do not have a commercial team, right? Clearly, we will have to raise additional capital to build a commercial team, but our strategy really is working with partners. That's why, as I mentioned just before, we have a potential partner in the US who wants to take on a non-exclusive base, for example, our Alzheimer's test and get that into the market. So, we are very strategically starting to think about potentially licensing some of those areas into organizations that actually already have a sales force in those channels, right? So you guys all know it takes a long time for us to build channels in all these areas. So, and it's expensive. So our initial thought really is to license some of those applications out as we continue to build our organization. Great question. here was, can you speak to your IR portfolio? I don't have any additional slides here, but we have on the IR portfolio. So that was the question. So we have on our website also, we have all the patents that we have approved, and we continue to work on that. Again, this is across multiple, a lot of focus, not just on myeloma, but other cancers as well. So the team has done a good job in the past, really focusing on filing these patents, and we can, again, I'll happy to, I believe we're going to get you contact information. I can follow up on that one. So I think we're running out of time. I know there are a lot more questions. And what I heard from the team is that I'll get all the questions and contact information that we can provide you more information for those ends I haven't provided. So with that, I want to close out. I want to thank you all again for your interest. Thank you for the great questions. And I'm truly looking forward to keeping you up to date on further activities. And please follow us. We are actively providing more news updates as we speak, to keep you in a loop of where we're going strategically with this company. So thank you again for your time.